Hello and welcome to Mansion Interviews, a podcast which gives me an excuse to talk to interesting people, while at the same time improving your English. Now, today we're going to listen to a chat I had with the wonderfully interesting Shanthi Cumaraswamy Streat, who is an English teacher based in London, but I met her in Sitges near Barcelona. Shanthi has a wonderful blog, and obviously we speak about that and many other things besides. So let's not waste any time. Let me introduce you to Shanthi from EnglishWithATwist.com. You can improve your listening with comprehension questions and find some help with difficult words from this interview at inglespodcast.com/Shanthi. That's SHANTHI. And I suggest you go to the webpage, look at the show notes, because this episode with Shanthi is particularly rich in vocabulary. Shanthi, you were born in London, as I was, but you've had a much more interesting background. You grew up, I believe, in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia.
Mm-hmm.
What memories do you have from there? Tell us what you remember from growing up there, and also maybe what your childhood smelt like when you were growing up.
Okay, what memories? I remember the heat, and I just remember, very much the heat, the lovely food. Malaysia always reminds me. I remember the going to the swimming pool, and also I think because we had a lot of my parents had lots of different friends in terms of we have Chinese and Indian friends. I was visiting them, and my biggest memory is always the food we had in Malaysia. It's always been and the different festivities, the different festivals depending on the religions, because we've got the Chinese, Indians, and Malays, and visiting people's homes for Hari Raya, which is Eid, the equivalent of Eid in Malaysia, and Chinese New Year and Diwali for the Indians. So that's what I loved the most.
How old were you when you left?
I was 15. So I moved to Malaysia when I was 2. And yes, I left it at 15.
And did you go straight from Malaysia to the UK?
No, I went to Italy.
Oh, right.
Yes,
Okay.
my mother is Italian and my father is Malaysian. When my parents separated, we moved back to Italy, and I did my O-levels and A-levels in Italy. And then
in Italian, obviously.
No, I went to the International School of Milan, and I did the Cambridge O-levels and A-levels, so it was English education. And when I finished A-levels, I came to the UK.
How did you feel as a 15-year-old changing cultures from a country like Malaysia to Italy? Do you remember how you felt at 15 arriving in Italy?
Yes. Oh, yes. Backtrack, even in Malaysia, I always felt rather awkward. Remember that, I'm half Italian, half Indian. My father is originally from Sri Lanka. So we were always we were always different in the sense that when you grow up in a mixed race family, with my Indian family, we were always the cousins that had this Western mother. And even growing up, I always thought, they always thought we were a bit forward as children. And it was funny because that's what they always thought of in Malaysia. And then when I arrived in Italy,
they thought you were shy because
Yes,
obviously
yes.
the Italians are so vivacious and so outspoken.
Absolutely. And so I was, suddenly there's this girl from Malaysia who, suddenly I find myself a bit backward, in the sense of socializing, the interaction between boys and girls, because in Malaysia you didn't have that so much. It was frowned upon. Girls don't go and mix with boys or don't chat too much with boys. It's not the done thing. Whereas then suddenly I arrive in Italy. This is the 80s, and they have a much more I would say sort of more natural interaction, boys and girls. But for me, it was really strange. And when I did move to Italy, first of all, at 15, I lived with my grandmother for the first 2 years. My mother didn't move until 2 years later. So
Did you speak it? Did you speak Italian when you got there?
it was, yes, fairly rusty, because the only Italian we ever learned was when my grandmother came to visit. So when she came to visit us, my mother didn't speak to us in Italian, unfortunately, because my father, not understanding Italian, felt a bit strange if my mother spoke to us in Italian. So we weren't raised bilingual, which was a real shame.
What was your father's native language?
English and Tamil.
Tamil. Okay.
Yes.
So did you grow up speaking Tamil or hearing Tamil in the house?
No, not really, because between my parents, it's English.
English, right.
So no, it was always English. So no, Tamil was very, very little. And my father didn't really teach us, but it was interesting. So Italian, no, going back to the Italian, we were fairly rusty. So when I went to school at the international school, of course, Italian was one of the subjects. And so I ended up learning not necessarily from scratch, but pretty much. So you're just thrown into the deep end and go with it.
That must have been quite traumatic as a 15-year-old.
I would look back on my teenage years, and I don't look back on it longingly and think those were the carefree days. They were very challenging.
So how old were you when you left Italy? I presume you went straight from Italy to the UK.
Yes, I was 19. Yes, in 1985.
Did you go straight to university?
Yes, I went straight to uni, so did my A-levels, got my grades, and went straight to the University of Southampton.
And you worked in finance and business for what, about 20 years, I think. And now you teach English and you blog about English. Shanthi, in what ways does your background in business and finance help you with what you're doing now in your English teaching role?
The finance less so. The business, having the business experience, the business background, it helps me in terms of understanding the business world, understanding the pressures businesses have, and also what goes on in an office, the office politics, the hierarchical politics that you can have in businesses, in companies, and the structures and what can happen, and in terms of also when companies merge and sales, teams have to come together. In terms of finance, yes, where I've taught financial English, in terms of investment management, and also my background in insurance has allowed me to appreciate certain clients who've approached me because of that background.
So when you're teaching, do you often go back to those days when you were working in offices and thinking, oh yes, in that situation I would say this or do this?
Yes and no. Sometimes I'll do it, particularly when we're looking at presentations, where we're talking about presentations, and then I would give an anecdote about those situations. Where they've had also conflicts, when we've been talking about conflict resolution, or there's been mergers, or particularly also in situations where people have been made redundant, and you're talking about human resources and what goes on in those situations, then yes, unfortunately, in the finance world, I was made redundant 3 times. So you understand the nervousness and the change that people have to go through in their careers and throughout their careers, and the development that is required, and how do you approach that?
So if you've been made redundant a couple of times, you've obviously been on several interviews. If you were to give one piece of advice to a non-native English speaker going to an interview in English, what would it be? What do you think is the most important thing for a student to bear in mind or think about when they're going for an interview in English? I remember my dad used to say to me, if you're asked a difficult question, just say, that's a very interesting question. Take out your handkerchief, blow your nose, give yourself a few seconds to think about it. Don't rush in and jump and say an answer straight away. Do you have any key advice that you'd give somebody who's having an interview in English?
I think my key advice, and I've just had this recent, having experienced this with some of two particular clients working on that. And what I found was not so much the English, the actual thinking of the whole interview structure. And it could be in their own language before they even think about it in English. And what I found was it wasn't so much the English that they had the problem with. What they hadn't thought about was clearly thinking about how they were going to, thinking about their achievements, their accomplishments, how they were going to put that forward. And often I found that they hadn't even given it any thought in their own language. So what I ended up doing was having to look back and say, think about that first, and how would you answer this in your own language? And so I ended up talking about that first, and then saying, right, now that you've got your ideas in your mind, that are clear, now let's try and put this into English. And then I found that they were able to express themselves, but because they had to get their ideas right. Most of us, we've all been there, where you're in a situation where you're going to be interviewed. And a lot of people who are coming up to their 40s and late 40s, unfortunately, are finding themselves without a job or having to relearn skills or, and then redevelop themselves. Then they have to think of how they're going to present themselves. And it's hard, first of all, in their own language, or really think hard before then you move on to the next part of doing it in English.
I think also a lot of people tend to focus more on their qualifications, on their experience, and they're not really thinking about how they're coming across as a person to the interviewer. And I think people employ people rather than CV. So you can have the most fantastic CV in the world, but if you're not connecting with the interviewer, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Then you're not. Then there's not going to be another interview because you're just not going to get through the first stage. You're just a piece of paper. You're not a personality.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I had a situation where my client had the CV, so we decided to do this role play. So she had her CV in front, and I said, right, okay. So we started, and I recorded this whole thing, and she regurgitated what was on the CV. And I said to her that, after this, and I said, this is wonderful, wonderful, thank you, but I could have read that all myself, and I have read that all myself. Exactly. I said, now you need to give me a story. You need to pick something, and you need to give me examples and how we're going to do this. Pick something, and you need to show me, and you need to think about turning it round. We use a lot of buzzwords. We use a lot of jargon. And a lot of my clients, I found that...
What's a buzzword?
A buzzword will be words that people use repetitively in a certain context.
I'm actually thinking of focusing more on business English myself. What qualities do you think a good business English teacher needs?
First and foremost, they need to be good listeners. Mm-hmm. And to be prepared to learn far more than you're ever going to teach your client. Because the business people you're going to come across are going to be so fascinating. They come from all walks of life. Remember that they are probably going to be at a higher level than you in terms of within their businesses. They have a lot of experience. Yes, you are that English teacher. Yes, you are helping them. But it's listening to what they can give you, what they need, and responding to it. Just be very empathetic to them and listen. I spend a lot of time listening to my clients, asking them a lot of questions and making them think for themselves. Treating them that they're business people, they're people who are used to problem solving. And just because they've come to see a teacher doesn't mean that I'm there now to impart all this knowledge. They're going to find that knowledge themselves with me helping them, just in the same way as they do it with their business. And so I try and do it that way with business people.
Your blog, your very successful blog, is englishwithatwist.com, which in Spanish I would probably translate to something like Inglés con un toque especial o un giro o una vuelta. Inglés con una vuelta.
Great accent.
Thank you. It's a wonderful blog. I've enjoyed reading it. And I'd like to ask you how often you blog. You seem to blog at least once a week. There seems to be something new up there. Do you have a schedule that you're releasing posts on a regular basis?
Yeah, I started off blogging twice a week, and then I brought it down to once. But no, I don't have a schedule as such. I just blog once a week. But I don't have a set day when I publish the post.
What do you blog about?
Oh, anything and everything I can think about.
How would you describe your blog to someone who's never seen it? It's definitely aimed at English students, not only business students, right?
Yes, it's everybody.
General English students.
Yes, general English. I would say it's a blog about the beauty of the English language. It's not the beauty of the English language, no, because I don't talk about the English language as such. It's exploring the world in English. Because I like to write about all sorts of different topics, but it just happens to be in English. And then it's a way to then show readers the patterns in English that we have.
And I really like the way you focus on vocabulary, and you kind of focus on vocabulary and expressions in a particular area, on a particular theme. How do you come up with, or how do you think of ideas for blog posts?
I don't sleep, basically. I have sleepless nights. I don't know. I'm just wired up in terms of everything around me just might trigger an idea. And I think, that could be a really good topic for a blog. I think I might write that. I mean, but what I do is I'll go around. I look a lot on social media, on Facebook, or I'll see an article. Sometimes I will bookmark it and think, okay, that's a good idea for a post sometime. Or then I'll see something, or I'll see a picture on Facebook and I think, you know what, that's quite a good idea, sort of like there and then, or,
nice and easy.
Nice and easy. So those two words that go together normally. And I just sort of thought to myself, you know what, that could be a good one where I could perhaps get a few where we use them in business English, for example, or perhaps we can put it in general English, or, I don't know, I just go to the supermarket or something and I'll just think, this could be an interesting topic to talk about or write about. And I just write about it and, just hope maybe people will find it interesting. What I do is I also go online and then I'll just see, has anybody else written about it? What other ideas did they have? And then sort of adapt it into this post.
You've said that through your blog you've discovered a love of writing. Have you written any fiction?
No, I haven't.
Is that something that's gone through your mind?
Not really, because I don't feel I'm that creative for fiction. I don't know. I just don't come up with the stories in a way that you need to develop a story, if you know what I mean. I don't know, thinking of characters and creating that character.
Maybe that's something for the future. You wrote an excellent blog post focusing on planning and reaching goals for English learning. I think it was called 5 Tips on How to Make New Year's Resolutions, something to improve your English.
Oh, yes.
I'll put a link to that blog post in the show notes, and you can find the show notes at inglespodcast.com/Shanthi, which is SHANTHI. Shanthi, have you connected to that? Have you made any New Year's resolutions? Have you set any goals for this year? What are your future goals or plans for English teaching online?
Yes. Well, I did.
Quite a big question.
Yeah. No, I decided a few years ago to stop making New Year's resolutions because I never seem to stick with that. But no, this year, my New Year's resolutions, I want to, go to the next stage in terms of perhaps working a bit more on putting more business English content for my business English learners. So steering more towards that end. So I just recently put together a survey to find out what it is that business English learners would want from an online resource, not necessarily just online courses, but just finding out what they would like to get. I mean, I've been thinking about a membership only service where for a subscription people would receive information on all sorts of things to do with business English. But I need to explore that. I need to find out more. I am going to embark on videoing. I've been resisting purely because I just think, I look out there and I think, oh gosh, everybody is so incredibly talented, and the technology that goes with it, I just find it all a bit too overwhelming. Having said that, everyone tells me, and you told me too, that YouTube is the go-to resource for a lot of people. And in fact, my survey came up with that a lot of business people also look at that. So I'm thinking, maybe I should venture into that. So I'm working on that. So yeah, I think that's my next stage for the moment.
Okay, that sounds interesting. So we can expect from you, apart from more blogging of general English, we can expect more business English focused blog posts, and also maybe some YouTube videos from you.
Yes.
Fantastic, great. And I think you also do one-to-one personal homestay tuition. Could you speak a bit about that?
Yeah, actually, I mean that is my my big earner, as it were, in terms of when I look at it overall as my income, and my niche, I would say, in terms of being slightly different from a lot of people. My full immersion courses, yes, I have. I've been doing these now I started off doing this for 6 years. Basically, my clients, a lot of people want to come on intensive courses to the UK. And I started 6 years ago to offer homestay options where my clients effectively come to stay with us. They live with us, my husband David and I teach them in the mornings, and they had the full immersion experience for 1 to 2 weeks. And it works really well for a lot of clients who particularly want to boost their English. I mean, obviously, an intensive course is never going to be enough, but it gives them that extra boost that they want, or also that crucial moment of just pure concentration on their English, and particularly for business people, that works because where they have a lot of distractions back home, or where they're even attending a course, sometimes they have to cancel it. A lot of my clients have said, the 1 or 2 weeks gives them that boost and gives them that much needed concentration time to just focus on their English.
So not only are they having intensive lessons with you on a daily basis, but obviously you're speaking to them outside of lesson time. Every day they're in an immersive English-speaking environment.
Yes, there's no escape for them, poor things.
There's no escape. Where in the UK are you based? Where would they expect to be?
I'm just outside London, southeast London. Well, southeast London. We're Borough of Bromley, which still comes under London. But in terms of trains, I'm literally 20 minutes by train into London Charing Cross. So we have a very fast network.
I've read that you like cooking. Do you cook for your students also?
Yes, oh yes. They have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with us. And
That must be worth it just for the Sri Lankan based dishes. I would think that's definitely worth the trip. Just to have some home cooking from
and
you.
my Italian food is interesting, actually. You talk about the cooking, that most of my clients, well, actually, all of them, they come here expecting to get British cooking, British food. And of course, you know how Europeans all feel that, that the Spaniards, the Italians in particular, they think, oh, good Lord, they're going to get terrible, terrible food. And then they turn up with me, and then I don't cook English food. And they're like, oh, gosh.
I saw on your webpage there was a Spanish gentleman staying with you. Do you get from the Spanish students that they don't like spicy food? No spicy food. Do you get that from them?
No, I don't.
My experience is that the Spanish don't tend to like very hot, spicy food.
Oh,
you haven't had that?
No, they've either been very polite and poor things have all gone home,
suffering in silence.
No, I've never had any. I mean, I've had. My Spanish clients are always so lovely, and no, not. I mean, I don't make it terribly spicy. I know In fact, I can't eat as spicy as my husband can. I know what what his tongue is made of, but mine is. No, I don't make it too spicy. No, I've never had that. Funnily enough.
Okay. What's your favorite Spanish dish?
Oh God, you could ask. I suppose I have to say paella, but you know what? I don't know an awful lot of Spanish dishes. I regret.
Have you ever been to Spain?
Yes, I have. Not as often as I'd like, and not as often as a lot of British people, because my time has always been spent more in Italy.
Right.
So no, I mean, I was just in Sitges last November, but before
that's where we met. Yeah.
But before that, I went to Madrid, and I did a trip to Granada, but no, I have not been. I don't know a lot of Spain. I know more my Spanish students talk to me about Spain than having been.
Shanthi, we only have a few minutes. I'd like to ask you a few quick-fire hot seat questions, so feel free to answer as briefly or as long as you like. What makes you happy?
Going to bed and reading a good book.
What annoys you? One thing.
I can't say bad word, can I?
You can, I'll beep it.
Bullshit.
From people in general?
People. I mean, I just can't. Yeah, I just cannot stand that. When people just, waffle and yeah.
Can you think of one thing that if you were to tell someone about yourself, they would find it difficult to believe? Something surprising about yourself?
Yeah, people are always surprised when I tell them I'm not confident. I
Really? That surprises me.
I lack confidence, but people don't believe me. They think, no, you come across, so sort of confident. I'm like, no.
You do. Which famous person or people, dead or alive, would you like to meet and speak to or have dinner with?
Barack Obama. I think it'd be fascinating.
What would you ask him?
How on earth has he survived working with Congress all this time?
Yeah, I'd be interested to know that too. Finally, yes. Shanthi, if you could go back to your late teens or early 20s, what advice would you give yourself?
To not worry so much, to take risks, and to just, go for it and not worry. I regret not taking certain decisions. I wish I'd traveled more, and I didn't when I was younger.
I think that's very good advice. Shanthi, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. And just to remind the listeners that you teach intensive one-to-one courses not only at your home, but also on Skype. So maybe you could leave us with telling people how they can get in touch with you and where they can find you on the interweb. Yes,
my they can get hold of me on my website, englishwithatwist.com. And I'm also on Facebook. I have a Facebook page, but if they go onto my website, they'll be able to contact me there and also have a look at my blog and hopefully subscribe to my blog. And
I would definitely suggest they subscribe to your blog because it is excellent.
Thank you very much.
And I definitely recommend that anybody studying English should bookmark your blog and go back to it every day.
Thank you, Craig. And thank you so much. It's been a pleasure answering your very difficult questions. Very difficult.
Thank you.
You made me have to think a lot.
Well, I hope so. I hope we'll speak again soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
It was so much fun talking with Shanthi. And don't forget, you can find her website, her blog, and all the services she offers, including the intensive homestay courses at English with a Twist. That's todo junto, English with a Twist, todo junto, .com. Thank you to you for listening to this Mansion interview. And remember, you can find more podcasts to improve your English at inglespodcast.com, and you can study English free at mentioningles.com. Finally, if you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes and give us some stars and maybe a short review so that more people can find our podcast. So go and show us some iTunes love.